asked me to talk about Netpep, and Netpep, I was going to suggest this topic if it hadn't been suggested by somebody else already. I think Richard Williamy probably suggested it. Because Netpep is a great program that TxDOT uses and TxDOT participates in. It's part of AASHTO. But I find that very few people in TxDOT, even in my own division, where it's very germane to materials acceptance, don't really know much about it. But it's really good, and so it's something I like to be able to talk about. And I went ahead and got some slides from the program director of Netpep, and she said, well, if these will suit your needs, that'll be fine. And I said, it doesn't really matter what they say as long as they have titles on them and I can just talk off the cuff as it were, because again, I like to talk about Netpep. It's very good program. So the question, what is Netpep, is one of my favorite questions to answer, especially for people I know, my friends, my family, who what I do comes up in a conversation and they say, well, what is Netpep? The problem with answering this question is you've got to get through the acronyms. You know, you've got to then say National Transportation Product Evaluation Program. And then if you make the mistake of saying it's part of AASHTO, then you've got to get out American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and you've lost them by that point. So you've got to get through that part and get to the explanation, which is this. Imagine a material like joint sealant or pipe or something like that every state DOT in the country uses. And they use essentially the same material that's made to meet essentially the same specs. There are only a handful of suppliers scattered around the country, but every one of those state DOTs has to approve, inspect, test, somehow accept that material as being what we said it needs to be and appropriate for use in the job. And we could do that 50 times, once for each state. Or we could combine our resources and do it once and then let as many states latch onto that and use it as possible. And that's when you get them back, because people who know nothing about the materials and know nothing about this industry then say, wow, I've never heard of that before. That's government actually doing something that makes sense. And so that's what Netpep is about, is combining our resources, being able to say, let's go and look at these materials, where it fits, and get a state DOT to be the leader and do the inspection, the testing, the evaluation, the auditing for a material or a material supplier, and then let all the other states use it. And it can save a lot of money and save a lot of effort on our parts. So what is Netpep not, and that's one thing that they're very careful to explain, is that Netpep is not about dictating to the states what their specs are going to be, or what materials they're going to use, or whether they even use the programs. Netpep doesn't judge the material as either good or bad. We come up with a testing program. The core unit of Netpep is a tech committee, which looks at a particular material. We come up with a testing or evaluation program. We have the manufacturers submit their materials and we test them, and we post the results on the website. And then the states are free to do with that result whatever they want to. And that's essentially how it works, and it works very well. It works well because the people who actually develop the testing programs are us. They're the state DOTs. And it says that it's provided for free to the states for that. That's not exactly true. The states are supposed to pay, if they want to participate in Netpep, an annual fee, which I believe, if I remember right, is $15,000 a year. But that is a good deal. When I first started working with Netpep, I think that fee was $7,500, and they made much out of the fact that the cost of all the testing that Netpep did and provided the results for was worth about $2 million. So that's a pretty good bargain. Now the program has grown a lot. The fee is more, but I guarantee you there's a lot more than $2 million of testing being done by Netpep. So we want to simplify the evaluation process, and these are the benefits to the state. It's an easier process for us. We don't have to commit nearly as much of our own resources to going and inspecting a product or testing a product. And this is to pre-qualify a material. We may still do our own testing at the job site for our acceptance testing. We still got to do our due diligence when we get our materials out there and make sure they're what we thought we are. but in terms of pre-qualifying those materials or pre-qualifying material suppliers, this can really save us a lot of our own work, make things faster and easier for us to get done. But it's also a benefit to the industry if the program works the way it's supposed to. Because if you're a material manufacturer and you can say, hey, I can submit my material to Netpep, and that means I have already met the pre-qualification requirements of a dozen, 20, 25, however many states are using that program by submitting it once. Hey, sign me up. That's an awesome idea. And so the industry can benefit from this too if we set the programs up the way they should be. The way it kind of works, as I mentioned, the core unit of Netpep is a technical committee. And there's a technical committee for a given type of material, and there's a whole bunch of them. But the membership are the state DOT members. And almost all of those people are people like me, materials people, who are responsible for writing those specs, for testing those materials, for knowing as much as possible about them. They're subject matter experts. And they get together and they come up with a testing program that they're going to use. And so that's kind of how it works. Some of the programs are testing programs where we actually get the materials, take them in the lab and do testing. Some of them are audit programs where we actually go visit a manufacturing site, go look at their quality plans, go look at how they manage their materials, how they train their people, how they calibrate their equipment, and make sure they have a reputable program to make the material. And so there are both of those kind of programs out there. And we get the industry involved. So when we have our annual meetings, when we have our conference calls, when we develop our work plans, we seek out that industry input. Definitely as the state DOTs, we like to be able to get together and say, well, we're going to kind of band together and decide what we want. And that way we can make sure that the industry doesn't keep us from doing our job properly, because that can happen sometimes. But we also have to make sure that our programs are reasonable and practical for the industry to live with. Otherwise, they won't be able to use them. And so that's very important for us to have that industry input. Now, they get to sit on those committees and offer input and that sort of thing. They don't get to vote because it's AASHTO, and AASHTO is a state DOT organization, so it's only the states that get to vote on these things. So currently, there are 24 technical committees, and I'll show you a list of what those are in a minute. 21 different products being evaluated and 8 audit programs. And this is since the first of this year. We've evaluated 635 products, and we have 160 audits scheduled. That's a lot of audits. So the audit programs have really taken off. The Netpep auditors do those audits. Our state DOT people don't have to do them, and if we were going out to do 160 audits, that would cost us a lot of money. And they've received the annual contributions from fiscal year 16 from 47 states. So they have very broad participation from all the states. That's the necessary thing for Netpep to work, is if the state DOTs don't buy into it, it doesn't work. If there's just one state trying to push a program, the industry doesn't want to go along with it, they don't really have to, and it's not profitable for them to do that. But if a whole bunch of states get in on it so that it's good for all the states, and it becomes good for the industry because they can satisfy a lot of states with one-stop shopping, then it's a good deal. So the way it works is we develop these work plan. The work plan is what we call the document that says what kind of testing or what kind of auditing we're going to do on a material. We do that in those tech committees. And we use the nationally recognized ASTM, AASHTO test procedures. If they're available, we set up those work plans. And then the industry is going to submit their materials, but then they pay a fee to have their material tested. So you might ask, if the states are only paying $15,000 a year, how do we do those millions of dollars worth of testing? And it's because the industry pays for the testing. The fee that they pay is intended to be enough to cover the cost of testing plus some overhead to cover the cost of administrating Netpep. And so that's why we can pay very little for the service and get all of this testing done, is because the industry people who submit their materials actually pay for the testing. And that's what supports the program. So there's a list of your tech committees. Some of those you can kind of see are in bold, and those are the ones that we actually use in our specs in TxDOT, that we actually either refer to in our specs or require in some way, or that we're looking at, that we're seriously considering adopting into our specs. And I don't want to go through all of them, but just some highlights. Top of the list is asphalt release agents. I think you heard mentioned yesterday that Richard Williamy developed this program. He did. He developed the asphalt release agent program for TxDOT, and that was a very successful program for us. And there was a time when Richard was having trouble communicating with a particular material supplier who wanted to submit a material, and they were going round and round with each other and were stuck on high center, not accomplishing anything. So he handed him off to me to try to break the ice and see if we could get things moving again. And in talking to that guy that came out, the guy says, well, what I'm doing really seems like a lot of work, considering I don't really even supply this material in Texas. And I went, say that again? And he said, no, we don't supply the material in Texas, but there are several other states that use your pre-qualified list. And I thought immediately, sounds like we should be getting something for that. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe that's a job for Netpep, because I knew something about Netpep then. And I went to the current Netpep champion in TxDOT, Robert Sarsanella, and said, what do you think? He said, that's exactly what Netpep's for. And the rest is history. We took Richard's great program, and it went national because we had the strongest program in the country. The Netpep work plan for asphalt release agents is now essentially the TxDOT release agent testing program. Richard actually still does all the testing in his lab, but everybody in the country uses it because it's put out there for everybody in the country to use. And we have a whole bunch of states who use that program. And that's kind of the way it's supposed to work. Going down the list, some that are really good, Warm Mix Asphalt Technologies is kind of a new committee. And this is a program to look at warm mix asphalt technologies that come out, do some vetting on those, and determine which ones seem like might be good technologies to use depending on what kind of testing you do. This is very similar to what TxDOT has done. We've kind of got our own program and are ahead of this because we were leaders in warm mix. But that's the idea, is to be able to do some mix testing and maybe do some trial work and find out whether those things are acceptable. So what we already did in Texas, other states are interested in doing the same thing, and we can potentially combine those resources and learn from each other. Elastomeric bridge bearing pads is one that we're going to start using. It just launched. It's an audit program. I'm the chair of that committee and helped develop that program. So that's a good one. We have the luxury in Texas of having big bridge bearing pad manufacturers in state, in Athens, Texas, and so it's very easy for us to go and audit. Other states don't really have that luxury. They would have to send auditors all around the country to look at those bridge bearing pad manufacturers. So it's a very good deal for them to be able to use Netpep's audit program instead of sending those people around themselves. So that's going to be a very good program. Even for us, though, and the point I made with Joe Roach was that if all we do is require this as the first hurdle to supply us bridge bearing pads, and we still continue to do all of the auditing and testing that we currently do, it still improves the industry, because now to get into the program, you have to have a reputable shop. You have to have a good quality program and that sort of thing, and that elevates the whole industry, particularly for the states that don't really have a program at all right now. This is a big boon for them because they had nothing. Now they've got a good audit program, and so that's great. There's some more, so going back just a little bit, you see that some of those are construction products evaluations, and that's where we're doing more of a lab evaluation, and the ones on the right are more audits, and so we're going to a manufacturing facility for those. There's a lot of traffic safety product evaluations, and we use a lot of those in TxDOT. You can see a lot of those are done. The one at the bottom, temporary traffic control devices, that's a good one if you ever get to go to any of the meetings or anything like that. Go to that committee meeting. It's very entertaining because it's all about running over stuff. It's also very entertaining because Tennessee is the lead state, and Danny Lane from Tennessee, who runs that program, is always very entertaining. But they're going to take those delineator posts and barrels and put them out there. The delineator posts are supposed to be 10-hit delineator posts, so they're going to put 2 rows of a dozen products out there and run over them 10 times with their car. And even though the posts are supposed to survive 10 hits, the car is not made to survive 120 hits from a delineator post, and so the cars get torn to pieces when they do that. And so that's been a big challenge for them, is figuring out how to make the car so that, 1, they do fairly uniform testing, and 2, that the car will survive the testing long enough for them to get work done. And I've told him, yeah, I'd like to come out there and see that if I'm ever riding through Tennessee. He says, we'll let you drive, Jerry. We'll even let you run into a barrel, which is a lot harder than you think to bear down on that barrel and run over it. So a lot of this testing can be a lot of fun. At the top of the other side, there's some maintenance products. Polymer concrete overlays is one that we're interested in, because we're looking at polymer concrete overlays in one sense, except we're calling them high friction surface treatments. And the traffic safety people are looking at that to go and do some work on curves around the state where they've had wet weather accidents to try to prevent those. And we're trying to push out a spec for that, but really we don't have any performance evaluation for that. We're basing everything on lab tests that we essentially got from the manufacturers, and then it becomes a challenge to make sure we're putting out a spec that gets us something that we think is good, but that is not proprietary. Well, the good news is Kentucky is the lead state for that program, and they not only have lab evaluation, but they've got a test deck where they actually go out and install the materials, monitor their performance over time, and then report that. And so is that a good idea for us to go and say, well, instead of just testing the material in the lab and coming up with a spec, let's go latch onto their test deck data and pre-qualify the materials that have actually shown whether or not they work in the field well or not. Yeah, sure, that's an awesome idea. So that's something we're really interested in doing. So we get industry participation from individual manufacturers, but there are a lot of industry associations that are also very interested in Netpep. They show up to the meetings, they offer a lot of input. In the past, when I first started, there were some particular committees that there was a lot of argument. Every committee meeting was a big argument with the industry over details. And the last couple of meetings, I have heard a lot of comments about how much the industry people come, and especially the association people that come to the meetings, give a positive input into these committees now, because they're really seeing the benefit. They're really seeing how the program can work for them, especially if they get in there and make reasonable suggestions and come up with practical things that we can use. And so they're really contributing members, even though they don't have a vote, they're really doing valuable stuff for us. So to launch new technical committees, that's one of the key things, is we've got a certain amount of committees, but what other things can we evaluate? And I've been involved in this process. I've helped launch 2 committees, which kind of makes me a specialist. What happens is there is a task force that surveys the states every year for ideas. Well, they take ideas at any time as submissions, say, hey, this would be a good program for Netpep, sort of like I did with the ARA thing. And then the executive committee comes up with a short list, sends out a survey to all the states every year, and if there's enough interest, say 8 or 10 states say, yeah, we'd like to have that program, well, then they launch a task force. They come up with a champion and start writing a work plan to say, well, how would we evaluate these materials? And if they can get that work plan worked out, they will ballot that, launch a work plan, and start testing materials, and that's how we start up new testing programs. One of the keys and one of the things that they're always looking for is somebody in a DOT that knows a lot about the material and that is ready to go to work and launch that plan, because it takes some work to get that work plan developed, written, get all the states satisfied with it, and that sort of thing. And what you find is you get all these states in the committee at first, and everybody's got sort of territory. They've got their own ideas, they've got their own regional things that they want out of a material. And so the first development of a work plan tends to be, well, let's throw everything in there that every state wants just to make sure they're interested. We don't want to drive them away. We want states to participate. We need that. So we try to satisfy everybody. The work plan gets all this stuff thrown into it, and hopefully it gets launched and we start testing. Once the program gets going, then you find that it starts feeding back the other way, because you've got all the material experts in the room from the state DOTs. And they start going, well, hey, what can we do better? How can we improve this and make it suit all of our needs without just throwing a bunch more tests in it? And so that's when you really start improving the work plan. And it becomes an issue of, well, hey, we don't really need to think about satisfying the specification in our state so much, because we're the people who write those specifications. So if we think we're doing a better job of testing the material, we can go change our specs to suit that. And so, and we get that synergy from all of those state DOT people who are working on that. So there's data mine. That's what they call their database, and that's where everything gets stored in Netpep, and that's where you can go and see what the tech committees are and what kind of data they have out there. And there's just some screenshots to show you what's on there, where you can go and see what the different tech committees are, what kind of materials they've tested, and that sort of thing. There's an example of a testing module where they just put the data in there, and as a state DOT, you can go in and see that data and see what the information we got on any given material was. Netpep website is going to have all that. It's going to have the ability to go look at technical committees and documents. It's going to have a states only area, because as the state DOTs, manufacturers can, they get to review the data, the testing data on their product before it's published. And if they decide to withdraw it for whatever reason, they can say, no, I don't want that to be published. Well, the state DOTs can still see everything even though it's been withdrawn, because it's our program. We want to be able to see everything that's done. And sometimes they withdraw a material. Being able to see those results may be a clue to something that's going on that we need to know about. And then there's just some more details. The documents section, you can find the work plans and find out exactly what the testing program is or the audit program is for a material. And then we have the annual meetings. They have an annual meeting around the country. It's in one of the 4 regions every year. It's a great time to go and meet up with these people. There's this camaraderie that I think I have, because the people from the other states are doing exactly the same job I am. And we really find that we have all the same challenges and we're trying to accomplish the same things. It's great to work with those people. We work very hard in the meetings, because it's not presentations like this. It's working technical committee meetings every day, and then some entertainment after hours, and much beer is consumed in some cases. And but we really find that the collaboration works very well at the meetings. One of the keys is that each state that's paying its fee can send one person to attend that meeting, and Netpep will pay for that. In addition, anybody who's in the leadership of a technical committee, in other words, a chair or a vice chair, also gets to go for free. And so if you want to be able to go to the annual meetings of Netpep and get them to pay for it, then you need to volunteer. Step up and be a leader in one of those committees, and you'll get your ticket paid for free. This next one is coming up in March in Boston, so that's going to be an interesting meeting. Should be cold up there, so us Texas guys will get to experience a little bit of that. We don't do that very often, but those are usually really good. So if you want to know how to get involved with Netpep or see if Netpep can test a product, go on the website. Review the work plans that you see there, look at some of the data, talk to other states maybe that have used it. The contact is on there for all the chairs and vice chairs of the committees. You can send them emails and talk to them. They're state DOT people just like us, and they love these programs and they're happy to help. And if we launch new programs, one of the things, again, that they're always looking for is champions. So if there's something coming up in Netpep that people can work on, and you have somebody who's very knowledgeable or very experienced, hey, those are the people that Netpep needs to participate. And so there's my contact information, and Catherine Molesky is the program manager for Netpep. They want states to participate, so they're always very helpful, and they want the program to be what we want it to be.